Hi guys and welcome to another video. Now what we have here today is SMSL SU-9 DAC, and that's a mid-range offering of SMSL. And it's interesting for me because lately I've tried their entry-level one, Sanskrit 10th MK2, that I really liked. Then I tried this SMSL M400, which is their higher-end offering. Again, very great device for its price, and now we have the one located in the middle, so let's see where is it actually lands when it comes to both features and sound quality. Okay, so I'll quickly go through connectivity, build and features, and then we can move on to the sound quality, which is the most important part, of course. So on the back here you can see that it's actually very similar to M400. Because, okay, let's start from here. We have AC input. It's universal from 100 to 240 volts, works globally. That means you cannot use and you don't need to use any external power supply. It is what it is. Just hook it to your mains, that's it. Regarding digital inputs, you have your typical USB, optical and coaxial, as well as Bluetooth antenna. And when it comes to outputs, we have very usual single-ended RCA outputs, but also balanced XLR outputs. So that's basically very similar to M400 here, and the exception is I2S over HDMI port. Everything else is the same, really. And going to the front of the unit, again, very similar affair. Volume knob that doubles as button, but you also have a nice and neat remote control, and of course display that again looks the same as on M400, but yeah, we can show that better when I turn it on actually. Okay, so we basically have the same menu as with M400, and some of you might have not seen that. Okay, so let's enter. You can choose inputs, of course, different digital filters. These introduce fairly small differences. Try them, choose for yourself. I will not talk much about these. And the interesting thing that you can find here is sound color. And standard option is uncolored, while all the other ones, Rich, several of them, Tube, several of them, then Crystal, again 3 of them, introduce some sort of slight change of sound character by, as I understood, by manipulating harmonic distortion. And personally, I'm not ashamed to admit that I actually liked Rich number 1, because it tamed those perky highs just a little bit to make experience a little bit more pleasure to my ears. And yeah, I enjoyed it in this mode more. Try for yourself, decide do you want to use one or not. And you can also put this DAC in a volume variable mode. That means that you can basically use it as a preamp, control the volume here. And you can put it in DAC mode, and that is fixed volume output, which is around 2 volts on single-ended outs and around 4 volts on balanced outputs. And now that we are done with all these features and functions, we can move to the actual sound quality. And again, I can tell you that the house signature of SMSL DACs is immediately noticeable. Again, very similar to M400 and Sanskrit 10th MK2, it leans more towards fuller and punchier sound instead of lean and thin and analytical, and I quite like that. I honestly quite like that. So everything is there basically. It's a very detailed sounding DAC. Bass has quite a bit of punch and volume. It's really nicely done. It sounds exciting, it sounds rhythmic. Mid-range is fuller than I came to expect from a typical Sabre DAC. Just, yeah, that means do not generalize, man. I have to keep reminding myself that. And only in the highest region I can detect some sort of slight edginess and sharpness going on here. But it's not excessive. It's nothing to worry about. It's just a part of the character of this DAC. And I'll talk about it a little bit more when I compare it directly to M400. So all in all, this is a well-balanced sound. Nothing really screams at you. It's not overly bassy, it's not overly bright or aggressive or edgy, it's just nicely balanced. And what I like even more is that it has very respectable amount of energy and amount of dynamics. It just sounds punchy, it sounds fun. And that's something, just for example, to put it into context, that you don't hear with the much more affordable one, Sanskrit 10th MK2. You don't hear it with Topping E30 either, for example. And these sound very detailed, they sound spacious and nice, but this one sounds more energetic, more punchy. It's like much more eager to rock. Okay, that's the expression, but it's actually very useful for any kind of music. These quick transients, when somebody pluck a guitar a little bit energetically, this one conveys the real life dynamics of that better than any entry-level DAC. And it's easily noticeable. And mid-range fullness is also really nice. It has quite decent tone timbre, and I love that. I'm a complete fool for tone timbre. It sounds full, it sounds nice. And as I mentioned, the only place that I actually noticed it is definitely a Sabre device. It's in the highest spectrum because it sounds a little bit sharper there. For example, compared to M400, this sounds smoother and warmer. Its top end is just tamer a little bit, but in a nice way, And that leads me to comparisons, these comparisons actually. So, okay, first let's say M400, it's 2 times the price. Is it worth it? What are the differences? Well, the first thing that probably most of you will notice is that M400 has just bigger sound. That means bigger sound stage. It's wider and it's also a little bit deeper, and instruments are separated a little bit better. Because of that, they have more space to breathe, more room to breathe. And only in comparison to M400, you realize that the sound stage on SU-9 is a little bit more narrow, and things are just brought closer to the center and a little bit more in between your speakers. It's not a huge difference, but it's noticeable. It's like upgrading from a 42-inch TV that is already big and nice to a 50-inch TV that is a little bit bigger, and you realize, yeah, image is a little bit larger and I see things a little bit easier. But when it comes to actual details, transients, edges, everything is quite similar. It's at the very, if not exactly the same, it's at very similar level. I cannot detect any micro details on M400 that I cannot hear on SU-9. Everything is there. Same amount of texture, of edges, of micro details, of air in the recording. And that's really, really good for SU-9 because it's capable to match these things with M400. It just packs them in a slightly smaller soundstage. And that's easier to notice with speakers that are positioned well in the room, that have room to breathe and actually create big soundstage. If you were using these with headphones, I think that would be much, much more difficult to notice, if you can notice it at all. You would probably focus more on sound signature differences, like this one sounds a little bit juicier in the mid-range, and its top end is tamed a little bit, it's warmer just a little bit, while this one is a little bit sharper. But in a good room setup that is able to portray well-sized soundstage, you will notice that M400 draws things a little bit wider and just bigger. The difference is not huge at all, and I'm actually impressed by this one and what it can do for that amount of money. Because when you compare it to the lower end, like Sanskrit 1010K2 and E30, for example, it's definitely even easier to notice that difference. This is just punchier, more energetic. It has better layering. It feels like the soundstage has more volume. And then when you go to M400, you notice that bigger soundstage and slightly fuller tone timbre, but I feel that SU-9 is closer to M400 than it is to Sanskrit and E30. And that makes it a damn good deal in my mind, you know, because regarding the price, it's right there in the middle, you know. These are like around $100, this one is $450, and this one is $800. But when it comes to sound, I feel that this one is like 80-85% of M400. And yeah, I don't want to get into numbers, but it's definitely closer to the higher end DAC than it is to these lower end DACs. So when it comes to sheer value, like performance to price ratio, it's great, man. It really is great. And you definitely get into that, you pay quite a bit more to get a little bit more, jumping from this one to M400. And some of you would maybe like me to compare it with RS2, Denafrip RS2, but if you watched my previous review of it and M400, you already know probably that I prefer RS2 because it has somehow more palpable, more firm bass line and more realistic mid-range with more airy highs, and it can create even bigger sound stage than M400. So yeah, it's only logical, you know. If I said I preferred it slightly to M400, and now I'm saying that M400 is slightly better than SU-9, then logic tells you that I prefer RS2 to SU-9 also. But that really takes nothing from SU-9 and its great value. Because if you don't compare it to devices that are almost twice the price, it's really great, man. And I'm in this hobby for quite some time now. And when I started with my first DACs, I don't know, some 6-7 years ago, to get this amount of quality, this amount of punchiness, dynamics, and resolution, you would have to go like beyond $1,000. And I heard a lot of devices, I owned some myself, but yeah, I cannot recall anything below $1,000 sounding this good. And that's a very interesting perspective. You know, those are the devices that used to cost quite a bit more, like 2, 3, more than 2 definitely, like 3 times more. And those would like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago receive glowing reviews, like 5 stars in the magazines. And now we have all of that great sound for $450. So yeah, when you have a good value like this, it's actually just easy to review it. You know, it's easy to make a recommendation. Because even if I like some more expensive device more, even if I think it sounds better, you have to take the price into the account. And you also, it's also nice to sometimes take a step back and think about the advancement of audio devices. And that people used to pay significantly more for the similar performance few years ago. It's just a great device with great set of features, great connectivity and great sound for a really reasonable price, and I think it's probably one of the best values currently on the market. Well, at least among the ones that I've personally tried, because I can never try everything that's on the market, of course. So that would be all for today, guys. Thank you for watching. And if you liked the video, please click like, share it, subscribe, and so on and so on. See you next time.